कुंकुमाला हारना मेरे को चलेगा मैं
We're into it.
We are into mobile development,
microservices architecture,
full stack development.
If engineers are into it, we're into it.
कुंकुमाला
We're into it.
इतना क्लोज है बड़ी बात है
Oh, that's lovely timing, the ball racing to the boundary. Well, the batsman sees that one early, gets into great position.
अरे हाफ वॉली दे दिया तो मैंने मार दिया मैं सिंगल का ही सोच के बैठा था ब्रो भाई अबे कार्तिक त्यागी को पहला ओवर दिया ये लोग ने कैच हो गया ओके नहीं सिक्स है ओके सिक्स है
Cracking delivery, almost. That is glorious. Perfect timing, high class.
लिविंगस्टन यू ब्यूटी भाई साहब सेंचुरी ऑफ 38 बॉल्स बेटे मैंने देखा ही नहीं यार चलो ऑरेंज कैप भी लिविंगस्टन के पास यार पिछला मैच भी मतलब
That's a good shot from the batsman. Wasn't the best ball.
लेट्स गो भाई लिविंगस्टन ओपी कर दो एक बार यार क्या ही मैच जीते अब बोलना मतलब जो लोग बोलते हैं लोग तो गाइस वेलकम बैक टू अनदर एपिसोड ऑफ क्रिकेट 22 माय करियर मोड जहां पे आज हम अपना वही काउंटी कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं नेक्स्ट मैच था अपना लैंकशायर के साथ में साथ ही मतलब सामने है एक ही बात है और हम खेल रहे हैं नॉर्थहैम्पटनशायर से ये है उनकी स्क्वाड तुम एक बार देख सकते हो फील्ड लगाते और बॉलिंग करते ये लोग ने टॉस जीत के बैटिंग लिए नमक बैटिंग कर रहा है सामने चलो फर्स्ट बॉल डालते हैं फील्ड लगा लिए तो भाई इंग्लैंड में देखो हल्की हल्की तुमको स्क्रीन पे बारिश दिख रही होगी और तो भाई ओवरकास्ट कंडीशन तो देख ही चुके हो मतलब इंग्लैंड में यही मजा है लेकिन लास्ट मैच में बॉलिंग करने में बहुत मजा आया था कि आज उतना ही सजा होगा चौका खा लिया भाई पहली बॉल पे शर्म कर ले थोड़ी सी तो कैसे एज ऑलवेज 3000 ऐसे बोल है लास्ट एपिसोड में भी नहीं हुआ था लेकिन एज ऑलवेज बोलना बंद नहीं हो पा रहा है लाइक कर दो यार प्लीज यार और रेगुलर देख तो सब्सक्राइब कर दो बेल आइकन के साथ इंस्टाग्राम पे फॉलो कर लो डिस्क्रिप्शन में सेकंड लाइन पे लिंक है लाइक सब्सक्राइब शेयर फटाक से कर दो यार मतलब 185 के भी ये वीडियो में ही करवा दो यार 200-300 रहते तुम्हारे लिए छोटी बात है यार भाई क्या ही स्विंग सीम हुई है और बाउंस भी है ये पिच पे बहुत बढ़िया विकेट मिल सकती थी और 300 कमेंट्स का ही बोल रहा था वीडियो को जो बेस्ट पार्ट लगे वो कमेंट कर देने का कर दिया करो भाई प्लीज वो 300 पिछले पे भी नहीं हुआ था पिछले के
Namaste, and another Sunday, 8 a.m. Indian Standard Time, and welcome to our program, Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga, on our Virat Hindustan Sangam social media channels. We are on our 161 episode, 161st episode of our series, which we have every Sunday with Dr. Swami. And today's topic is the emergency 1975-77, how it happened, how to ensure it won't happen again. So this is the discussion. As you all know, this is today and this week has been the anniversary of the emergency that was imposed in June 1975 by Srimati Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister. And we were all motivated by that one slogan during the emergency, Andhere mein ek prakash, Jai Prakash, Jai Prakash. And that kept the movement going. And as you all know, a lot of volunteers, especially of the RSS and other opposition parties then, were arrested. There were court arresting going on. The RSS contribute the largest number of people that were detained during the emergency. And beside the RSS, the Akali Dal also on a systematic basis had courted arrest. And as you know, what happened between those dark days and when it was then relaxed in around March 1977. Dr. Swami has been one of the persons who opposed the emergency, and as you know, his role in exiting India undetected, re-entering India undetected, making a dramatic appearance in Parliament on 10th of August 1976, and then again going back abroad. All this is part of history. We will today be discussing how it happened and why it should not happen and how to ensure that it not happen again. I have to thank my co-host, Professor Arvind Chaturvedi from Delhi, Ramesh Swami, and also the technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Tejas Navalgul, Ishwar Iyer, Swaminathan, Rakesh Gadgi, Vishal Mehta, and Ajesh Nair for their inputs for every program we put together and webcast, telecast on every Sunday at So with these words, it is over to Dr. Swami, the hero of the emergency, to tell us about today's subject. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
The real refugee.
Thank you very much, Jagdish. The emergency lasted 20 months. It was formally declared on 26th June of 1975, and it ended in March after the Janata won the elections. I think on March 24th, when Moraji Desai took oath of office. Now, the question basically this time, because we have done this kind of show earlier, and there's been much discussion, so on and so forth. And I'd like to put some new perspectives on that, on the emergency, because there are lots of little facts which are not known to people. So I think it should be put in so that we have a complete picture. As Jagdish just pointed out, how it happened, and that emergency was imposed certainly on the 26th of June by invoking Article 352 of the Constitution. And I'll just now read it out and show what kind of changes have taken place since the Janata came to power, and we brought in a lot of constitutional amendments to see that such things don't happen in the future. But before that, I'd like to say that emergency was being planned from 1972. This people don't know, and most Indians don't know that the idea of declaring a state of emergency what began with Kumara Mangalam, who later died in a air crash. So, yeah, but the left wing, which was part of Indira Gandhi's group, plus the Soviet Union, they had said, worked out that emergency should be brought in and then legitimized. And after that, India will be a democracy, but it will be kind of a guided democracy. That was the game plan, which began in 1972, and all kinds of things were being worked out and projected. The law minister, Mr. Gokhale, was another leftist. Kumara Mangalam was a steel minister, another leftist. Borua was another person. In fact, he at one stage he even headed the party. So all these are pro-Soviet left-wing types, and they were planning to see that this constant elections don't take place, and therefore to have maybe 7 years for one election to take place, not 5, and that it should be the requirements of who can contest, who can't contest, who will be a political party, who's not. All these things were being worked out. The problem was that Raj Narayan had contested against Indira Gandhi in the 1971 elections and lost. And then he filed a case in the High Court saying that this is there has been a lot of fraudulent activity to enable Indira Gandhi to win, and that's how he lost. And so the case was taken up by his lawyers, Shanti Bhushan, and it went on. And on the 12th of June, the High Court, Allahabad High Court, single judge, Jagmohan Lal Sinha, he pronounced that she had violated certain conditions, like her whole platform to address meetings and all were paid for by the government. So these were called technicalities, but the fact is that there were violations, and he set aside her election. Now, it was set aside at the time when JP movement was already, had got a huge momentum. I know it for a fact because from day one, JP associated me with it. And it was I who brought Nanaji Deshmukh and Jayaprakash Narayan together. Otherwise, Jayaprakash Narayan had a great hostility towards the RSS, and I helped him overcome it, saying that you don't have an organization. The only people who have an organization is the RSS, and I would like you to meet Mr. Nanaji and develop a certain friendship. And Nanaji became his fan. Nanaji gave the organization, and JP movement had taken off by then. So on the 12th of June, when this Allahabad High Court decision came, JP was already well prepared organizationally, and he asked Indira Gandhi resign and go, and for that purpose, a public meeting was fixed for the 25th of June in Ramlila grounds. And if you see the pictures, you will see me sitting in the front row between JP and Moraji Desai. And people ask me, how did you end up there? You're at that time such a young junior person. it was Nanaji who planted me there because JP and Moraji Desai had a quarrel on the 25th of June, and over a very silly matter. Moraji was a stickler for time, and Madan Lal Khurana, who was the Delhi in charge of Jansangh, he put out posters saying 5 o'clock will be the public meeting. And JP said in the summer, 5 o'clock, I will not come before 8 o'clock. And Moraji then quarreled. He said, if you give a poster and put a time, you have to abide by it. This lack of indiscipline, this, that, big jhagda took place. I will not come if you do not turn up at 5 o'clock. He told Moraji told JP. And everybody was flabbergasted. And finally, Nanaji told me, both of these two people have a very high opinion of you. Can you sit with them and bring them together? So that's how I ended up in the front row. And all the pictures which you see of the 25th January public meeting in Ramlila grounds, you'll see me sitting next to JP and Moraji Desai, and on the other side, Nanaji Deshmukh. Of course, Judge Vajpayee had boycotted this whole JP movement. I think he was under pressure from Indira Gandhi, and throughout the emergency also he was under pressure from Indira Gandhi. And he was very much against my going underground and going abroad and so on. So all those things are not material just now. I am not concerned with that. I'm concerned with the fact that the emergency was not declared by Mrs. Gandhi because JP had threatened so-and-so or Moraji Desai had threatened so-and-so. It was a plan by the Soviet lobby to do it and the planning was done from 1972. And unfortunately, for all of them, the Allahabad High Court sort of upset the apple cart, and so they had to speedily do this. They were planning to do it actually in 76, but it turned out that they had to do it in 75. So the emergency declaration had nothing materially to do with Mrs. Indira Gandhi's being set aside. It only was the accelerator. It was only the thing that accelerated the whole process. But the fact is that there was a clear-cut plan to finish democracy and introduce a Soviet-style society, political society. So now that is something that I'd like you to clearly understand, that this is not, many people said, oh, there's all these demonstrations of JP and all, that created the emergency. Nonsense. It was a pre-planned thing which they had, which they put into action. Because they had, they just accelerated the thing because the Allahabad High Court judgment. But it was something that was there. And if it hadn't happened in 1975, 26th June, it would have happened as per their plan in sometime in not 1975, but 1976. So the sinister plan was unfortunately disrupted by the fact that the Allahabad High Court gave a judgment. Now, when I look at the Article 352, which was invoked, I have there with me here the amended version, and I'll just sort of put it out. It says it's Article 352. It's part 8 of part 18, excuse me, of the Constitution, and it says If the president is satisfied that a grave emergency exists where the security of India or any part of the territory thereof is threatened, whether by war or external aggression, and then in the bracket originally was a disturbance, internal disturbance, which meant anything and everything, which is what Mrs. Gandhi utilized. But the Janata government, which came subsequently, replaced that internal disturbance with the word armed rebellion. So now nobody can use Article 352 just like that. There's a disturbance, and therefore we can put in an emergency all the fundamental rights, everything was suspended. So therefore, the emergency provision is something that we have corrected in the Janata period. And so when you say, can it happen again? Let me say at this stage that it can happen again, but it had better be something extraordinary. And it's the circumstances that change. We can have subtle emergency. I would say today the way the Narendra Modi and Mr. Amit Shah are going about, there's a kind of a subtle fear that has gone across the media, across the academics, even in the courts, and there's no declaration of emergency, and you can't declare it because it has to be an armed rebellion. There's no armed rebellion, so they can't invoke that. But in effective terms, we need again, let me say, we may have to bring in another amendment to ensure that even a subtle emergency cannot be imposed unless it is backed by the following ABCD, reasons. Because I am witnessing, I saw a bit of it when Sonia Gandhi brought in that Hindu terror business. And that was also part of the creeping emergency that they wanted to do. And I find that Mr. Modi also, they and Mr. Amit Shah together, they have induced a lot of fear in our society. And I think it's time we address that. And I would like to see people who have some guts to come out and openly express it. And hopefully that somehow they will change their mind. I certainly would like to see the RSS in particular. I've been interacting with the RSS and mentioning about these matters. I think we have seen some of it in Gujarat earlier when the riots took place. But those are things taking us very far afield. It's not the right time for me to deal with it. But I will say that can it happen again? Yes, of course, but in a new form, it won't be like that old one we saw. So therefore, I would like to say that Article 352 has been amended to the point where nobody can utilize it. Because it's an armed rebellion. It is not like the old days, an internal disturbance. That's gone. Now you have to show that there's an armed rebellion, and that's very tough to show. But that will depend on the fact that the Supreme Court, the media, all of them are gutsy enough to challenge it if somebody tried to bring in through a subdued version of the emergency. Now, when the emergency was declared, I was in that meeting of June 25th, and I had gone home. Before going home, JP asked me to have dinner with them, so I had dinner with them. It was till midnight. And then I went home, I went to sleep. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call. It was a very strange phone call. It was from in those days I used to live in my private house in Greater Kailash. So that phone call was from the Greater Kailash police station, and the SHO phoned me up and he said, uh, Swami Saab, आप घर में हैं? So I told him, "ये क्या बात कर रहे हो आप 4 बजे सुबह फ़ोन करके मुझसे पूछते हो घर पर है?" नहीं, मैं यही सोच रहा था कि आप घर में हैं तो मैं आपको मिलने के लिए आऊँगा. Now that gave me the hint that the police was giving me, they said, "Get out, run away, because I have to arrest you." And so immediately I told my wife that, listen, there's something weird that has happened, and for a day or two, I'm going to go and hide somewhere. So I packed up a few clothes, and I went off to hide in somebody's house in Gold Market, and to see, what is developing, which I only came to know next morning when Mrs. Gandhi at 8 a.m. addressed the television, the radio. I don't think she addressed the television, but it was a radio address, and then I came to know that an emergency had been imposed. Then after that, during the half day, I was wondering, what am I going to do? I can't be living in this man's house, whose house I've come in. He'll get nervous, he'll get afraid, and then the police will start hunting me because I'm missing in Greater Kailash. So luckily for me, Nanaji Deshmukh sent a Swayamsevak and said, please come right away wherever you are. I want to meet you. So I went, and there Nanaji told me that he and I should be together. And Nanaji didn't know how to drive a car. But I was brought up in America for a good part, and America, you're nothing if you don't know how to drive a car. So therefore, he wanted me to be used as a driver. And for the next 2 months before Nanaji got arrested, I drove Nanaji around. Nanaji created a tremendous network. I mean, unbelievable, the genius this man had. I'm sorry that his heart broke in 1980 and he quit politics and went away to the villages of Uttar Pradesh. And I don't want to get into that just now. It's got nothing to do with the emergency. But the fact is that Nanaji initiated me into this whole emergency thing. And when he got arrested, Nanaji was appointed by JP as the chairman of the committee to fight the emergency. Lok Sangharsh Samiti, it was called. And he was the chairman, and I was his secretary. And then Nanaji got arrested. So therefore, I don't know what to do. And the thing actually collapsed. But very soon, RSS donated their general secretary, Mother of Mule, absolute genius and a wonderful human being. And he took over. And the first thing he said to me is that he had got a message from JP that it is a waste of time, waste of talent to keep Swami in India. Tell him to go abroad and somehow find a way and go abroad and campaign there about how, because Mrs. Gandhi had made out the myth that only smugglers are in jail, thieves are in jail, and crooked politicians are in jail. Then all that rubbish was so that had gone all over the world. And so he wanted, no, JP wanted me. He said, you go to America, England also if necessary, and Canada also if necessary. And from there on their television, particularly BBC and the Voice of America, which is heard by Indians here in India, you see if you can get into and give a do an analysis. Fortunately for me, Harvard connection was there, so I got easy connections to all these BBC and Voice of America and the French French radio and so on. So I began propagating it. In the meantime, the Swayamsevaks who were in America, London, and Canada, they all created a unit, and we started holding public meetings. Mahesh Mehta was the leader in that. Jitendra Kumar, who's still in Washington, was another brilliant organizer. So these are the kinds of things. So we built a whole network, and very soon Mrs. Gandhi's name was mud in the United States, and the public began demanding the restoration of democracy. So I had one problem, and before I hand over to you people for comments, and then we can take it forward. I had one problem. I had reached United States. I had reached London on the 7th of January 1976. That is, the emergency was 75, and then by the time I reached London, it was 1976. And I didn't have any new material. I kept on saying the same thing. It became very still. And people said, if there is an underground, if people don't like the emergency, because we hear that trains are running on time, officers are coming to office on time, and people are very happy, there's no corruption, there's this, that, all kinds of rubbish counter arguments. So I had this in my mind now. How do I now continue like this? I mean, I've done 4 or 5 months in the United States. It's getting stale. I got no new material. And in India, everything was become silent. George Fernandez got arrested. Nana Ji got arrested. So many people were getting arrested. So it soon became clear that there's just nobody. So what do I do? So at that time, suddenly the thought occurred to me that why not I go back to India and perhaps appear in Parliament and then disappear again and come back to America again. Is it possible? And then I started plotting that, and everybody was against it. I got even messages from Mother Amule. Well, if you do it, it'll be huge. But we don't want to help you at all, because then you get caught, then the entire chain will be caught. And so you do this, get it done, turn up in Bombay, and after that, I take responsibility to see that you go abroad again. So Mother Mule put this condition, and I agreed with him. And so I decided I must do this. And I don't want to go into the details how I got into India. I literally came by commercial aircraft, landed in Delhi airport, and walked out of the airport, airport without being detected. Now, how did that happen? Well, I mean, it's a long story, maybe some other time. But on the 10th of August, 1976, I got hold of my wife. You would be surprised to know that after I reached Delhi, I moved into my own house and lived there for 5 days. Nobody had a clue. Why? Because I went dressed like a Sardaji. and rang the doorbell. Previously agreed with my wife that she'll open it and say, "Kya baat hai?" And I will say, "Aapka television kharab hai, complaint aaya hai to." And so she would and let me enter. And fortunately, the police, which was seated outside my house and outside the gate, they had a badali. So the badali people were not told that some Sardaji has gone in and is not coming out. So find out what the hell is going on. They were all very bored with the whole thing. So they just, the badali took place. So 5 days I was in my own house. And on the fifth day, I drove my car to the parliament and told my wife when I dropped her in Vijay Chowk, and I said, if you can just remember that when if after about 15 minutes you go and see whether the car is still parked there, it means I've been arrested. If there's no car, it means I've taken the car and parked it in Birla Mandir parking lot. So you can pick it up from there. So that's how the whole thing was beautifully arranged. I managed to reach Bombay, and Mother of Mule arranged a car by which I went to Nepal. The Nepal king was a student when I was teaching at Harvard, and he arranged to see that I fly out, and I landed up in London, and then from there to Washington. So, I mean, that shattered Mrs. Gandhi completely. And every newspaper in the United States, England, had, oh, Mrs. Gandhi's sham emergency made out of mud and all that. So she was mad as hell, and God knows they attached my properties, everything. I mean, but it was too late. And by Mrs. Gandhi later on told me, because I had become friends with Rajiv Gandhi, that the day I went into Parliament disappeared. She said to everybody, "You all have been telling me lies that the country likes what I'm doing, and this couldn't have happened if that was so. So elections are inevitable." And she herself told me that, but for my coming to Parliament and going, she would never have declared an election, which of course she lost. And therefore, emergency went. So now I've given you a broad picture. I would like to say to you that some of the people who deserve real credit is RSS, because their organization was all over. And that's why we won mostly in North India, because the RSS was there only in North India. And the Tamil Nadu, and there was not much RSS. So there Mrs. Gandhi won hands down. But up in the north, because of the RSS organization, we were able to find candidates. We were able to find abilities to put up a show and so on. And ultimately, the public responded, and we defeated Mrs. Gandhi. Now, I would add this much, that there were a lot of people who were highly discouraging. One is Vajpayee. Of course, after the emergency was over, he was all over the place talking, writing poems on emergency and so on. But he never went to jail. People think he went to jail. No, the first day he was picked up in Bangalore. He had gone for a committee meeting of Parliament, and he was picked up. And the next day, Mrs. Gandhi intervened, and Mrs. Kaul, the live-in lady of Mr. Vajpayee, she appealed to Mrs. Gandhi, and so Mrs. Gandhi put him on payroll. And Ram Bahadur Wright has written a book about how he went to see Vajpayee, and what Vajpayee said, that you guys are all made a mess of the whole thing. You have to now, JP has landed us into a lot of soup and this and that, all kinds of things. With me also, he was constantly writing letters saying, better you surrender. Because of you, she's not lifting the emergency. But Madhava Mule said, that to hell with it. Just give me his letter and I'll tear it up. And so um, uh, there were very many people who had cracked up. But I must say, for the youngsters, particularly of the RSS, Vishwandha Parishad, I mean Vidyarthi Parishad and so on, extremely very good. And I know Modi today may say that he was wearing a sardar and this and that. I never saw anything of him. And he was only 24 years old. I mean, what is he? Who's he bluffing? But he had no role to play. There are a lot of people who claim that, but it's okay. But the fact is that it's the cadre of RSS. For example, Jagdish knows there's a guy called Baliga uh, in um, uh, in Bombay, and he used to come with the newspapers. And every evening with letters which Roxana, my wife, had written, giving me the update and so on. And he took such a big risk. There were people like that all over the country. And let us not forget them. It's easy today, some people claiming, oh, I played a role in the emergency. The only people who played a role in the RSS organization, all the big leaders, Nana Gore and X, Y, Z, all these socialists, everybody, they all had chickened out. But the youngsters were the ones who played a role. Today, I would say, to conclude, that we must understand that that emergency was explicit. Today, we have a kind of osmosis that is taking place. That is, it's not explicit, but there is a suffocation of democracy that's taking place, and we must all pledge not to allow that to happen. Mrs. Sonia Gandhi started this whole thing, all this Hindu terror, this, that nonsense, and nearly finished democracy. And then we defeated her. But today, again, I find the same thing, that we are targeted if we don't agree with Mr. Modi or Mr. Amit Shah. And you get the targeting done in very subtle ways. So, but you got to fight it. And we should also do that. So over to you, Jagdish.
Thank you, Dr. Swami, for that interesting insight, especially what led to the emergency and thereafter your experiences and some hint of what's happening at present in whatever form. Dr. Swami, also please tell us that during the emergency and especially after the emergency, there were a lot of people who perhaps jumped onto the bandwagon and wanted to claim credit. You have just now even mentioned. But what was the role of these people like Devkant Barua, who called Indira is India and India is Indira, all that type of slogans? And especially there was some party men within the Congress also who opposed the emergency. Could you just tell us a little bit of that thing? Because what is important is, although Congress party, I would say, anti-democratic moves they did, but there were some people within the party also that opposed Indira Gandhi and perhaps got arrested. If you can show us some light on their internal party voices that were there, with maybe a small voice, but what about that? Could you just enlighten our viewers, especially the younger generation?
Well, the person who had to go to jail for saying this is wrong, this putting JP in jail is very wrong, etc., was Chandrasekhar, and and his associates. And she put him in jail. She put him in solitary confinement in somewhere in Haryana. And he is subjected to torture. He's written, I think Chandrasekhar has written his volumes, his diary, so to speak. Morarji was the person who I can say shattered, rattled, whatever you want to call it, Mrs. Gandhi. Because JP had his kidneys were knocked out, and he was in hospital, and he was of the view, why am I putting everybody to this kind of torture? Let me see if I can speak to her and some way to bring her around. Bajpayee, of course, was a total surrender. And so, in fact, the second time I had to go abroad was Madhurav Mole told me that Mrs. Indira Gandhi and the leaders of the opposition, they are meeting to work out a compromise by which the emergency can be lifted. But the first thing that has to be delivered is you have to be delivered to her. So I said, I have no problem, deliver, hand me over to. So he said, no, after that, your kidneys will be removed, your eyes will be punctured. You don't know how much hatred there is for you. So you leave. And now, and so I had to leave the second time, not because I wanted to leave, but Mother Mule told me, you have to leave, otherwise you will not be dead, but you will be certainly maimed for the rest of your life. And these are the things they are planning against you and so on. And Mrs. Gandhi had gone berserk with me because I made her look silly, walking into parliament, making a speech and buzzing off. So she was a laughing stock all over the world. So therefore, I would say the underground, there's just no question. It was the RSS, and particularly led by Madhurav Mole, Tattopan Tengri. Nanaji, of course, got arrested. Then all these top men, and they all went on building the organization. We got I'll have to remember them. And if any time I write a book, because I'm not writing a book on it, because I'll have to write the whole story. But when I do write a book, I will mention all this. Moropan Pingle, for example, he was a man who boosted your morale. All these young swayamsevaks like you yourself met Baliga, who braved everything and brought me papers and letters.
Jagdish Baliga from Ville Parle.
Ville Parle. So I mean, the valor of the young people is really what I believe is something that we should record sometime in the future. So I would say amongst the leaders, Chandrasekhar stood out by criticizing Mrs. Gandhi for putting JP in jail, and she put him in jail instead, and in solitary confinement. But Mrs. Gandhi ultimately called for elections because of the obstinacy of Mr. Morarji Desai. And by the way, Morarji Desai was kept in solitary confinement. He was 80 years old and they kept him in solitary confinement. And then finally she sent emissaries after emissaries. He said, no, withdraw the emergency or I'm not coming out. Let me die in peace here, but I will not agree to it. Others all sort of agreed. Nana Gore, Bajpayee, of course, was in a surrender mode perpetually. All these people. But Morarji didn't, refused. He said, no, what you have done is against all that we fought the British, against the British. Now you withdraw that, or I am not coming out. And it is that. Charan Singh came out on parole, but he never buckled under. I mean, to his credit, he had a health problem, so he came out. But he continued to maintain that you have to withdraw the emergency. So the I would say amongst these people, Moraji is number one, Chandrasekhar is number two, and Charan Singh is number three. They were in the forefront. They were the people who made it possible for the emergency to go.
Dr. Swami, you mentioned that, given the current situation today in India, there's kind of a sense of fear. So what do you think would trigger that, what would be the right combination that this emergency could be triggered again? This is a question from one of the viewers, so I'm putting it in perspective as to what you said before. So what are the ingredients that could trigger this again, and what can we do, literally? And you mentioned some amendments have to be made. So based on that, I would love to have your answer.
No, you see, the issue is if judges cannot stand to the government, then one pillar is collapsed. If the bureaucrats are ready to say and do anything the ministers or the Prime Minister's office says, then that's another pillar that is breaking up. We need
even
then,
the media for now, basically.
No, media and intellectuals. I mean, the intellectuals are all collapsing. They're afraid. They get threatened. I don't get threatened, but I do get silly tweets, which you people have been noticing, which I, of course, enjoy and delete. But the fact is that there is a lot of intimidation that is going on. And if you start succumbing to that, it will encourage people. They'll say, why have elections at all? Everybody knows that Modi is the most powerful man, most popular. He's he's thought of very highly all over the world, and all this great world leader, and so on. So I'm saying that we must have to be very clear that democracy requires continuous support, and that continuous support has been written by so many people in the United States when in the 1700s and 1800s when the democracy was under threat. So we have to do it also. And these are the things that I think every pillar should be encouraged to take a stand. People tell me, you have taken a stand, so Modi will never make you a member of parliament. I said, who asked him to make me a member of parliament? I don't need to be a parliament member so to lose my self-respect. But I also know that all those people who have crawled before him, they too have been kicked around. So, I mean, the issue is to be a good boy. That's the most dangerous advice that you can give to anybody.
But sadly, Dr. Swami, even the opposition is literally non-existent these days.
Yeah,
as you said, the intellectuals have not only kicked out or made useless within the party and within BJP, but even the opposition has been the same thing. They're falling too. The entire Buddhu family. So what do you expect? Sadly, even the opposition is not in a position to even put up a credible fight.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that evil man called Chidambaram. My God, what he did with that Hindu terror! How many lives he ruined? There are some general, colonels of our army who have been through hell. Then there have been Sadhvi who had to, suffer being stripped in the by the police.
police.
Yeah, I mean, all these things. They're not. Modi is not the author of this. Modi is just an executor of what was already started.
Yeah, and sadly, even in the past 6 months, what we have seen played out in a way, there's not been either an attempt to have a firm hand to deal with the situation, allow it to fester, and bring it up into a position where there is a lot of riots and things going all over the country, and
Yeah.
that's perfect ingredient to bring in another
Yeah.
kind of emergency.
That's right. That's a good excuse. Yeah. Yeah.
Arvindji, go ahead.
Dr. Swami, I have 3-4 points. My first point is about Indira Gandhi's decision after the 12th June judgment. Kuldeep Nair, who was a journalist, who wrote a book called The Judgment earlier, in his autobiography, he has written that Mrs. Gandhi had actually decided to resign. But it was Sanjay Gandhi and the Siddharth Shankar Ray. Siddharth Shankar Ray, who was her legal advisor and leader from the West Bengal of his party, Sanjay Gandhi and Siddharth Shankar Ray persuaded her to impose the emergency. Number one. Number two, Jagdish had asked this question about the Congress leaders. After the elections were declared, the large number of Congress leaders, including Babu Jagjeevan Ram, Hemati Nandan Bahuguna, and others who formed this part called Congress for Democracy.
Nandini
And
Satpathy.
though during the emergency they did not speak like Chandrasekhar did, but after the emergency was lifted, before the Janata Party came into existence for the elections, the Congress for Democracy became actually a part of the Janata Party, or a alliance member of the Janata Party. Number three, the issue about the election that Mrs. Gandhi lost. It was during the excesses, due to excesses during the emergency, and especially in North, I can say vouch for Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, others, where the Congress were totally wiped out. It was one issue called Nasbandi. Nasbandi was actually forced sterilization of the people, and each member of the government department were given some quota. कि इतने नसबंदी के केस आपको लेके आने, otherwise आपकी नौकरी चली जाएगी. Teachers were put on the job, so it was Sanjay Gandhi who had introduced this idea, and along with Mrs. Gandhi's 20-point program, Sanjay Gandhi had 4-point program. So we used to say कि बेटे के 4 माँ के 20 दोनों मिलकर 420. This was the slogan going on those days. So it was Sanjay Gandhi who also had a role to play in defeat of the Congress post-emergency. And number 4, I want to ask you, after Mrs. Gandhi lost Allahabad High Court, she had actually introduced an amendment in the month of August 75 that any election petition against the president, vice president, speaker and prime minister cannot be handled by a court. It will be handled by a special body. And this was introduced by Mr. Gokhale, who was the law minister. So I would like, since you are knowledgeable about these things more than anybody else, would like to mention these things.
Well, what Kuldeep Nair says is rubbish. I was on a train after entering Parliament and then disappearing. I was on a passenger train from Delhi railway station to Mathura. On my way to change to GT and go to Nagpur, and from Nagpur go to Bombay. So in the train, nobody was talking about Nasbandi. They were only talking, किसी से मिल नहीं सकते, हमारे MLA गायब हो गया, किसको हम अपनी मुसीबत बताएं? So that's complete contradiction because people try to play down the democratic character of India. And yes, I do berate the South Indians that despite your being so educated, you voted for Indira Gandhi. I can understand UP Walas wanting to vote for Indira Gandhi, which they didn't. But the South voted for Indira Gandhi, and there was no reason why they should have voted. But in the North, I remember they very clearly each time said, किसी से बात ही नहीं कर सकते मेरा एमएलए से का वो मेरा मैं उसको पहुंचता उसके पास पहुंच भी नहीं सकता हूँ nobody said नसबंदी हो गई ये हो गई nothing I didn't hear in that entire train so this is something which they made it easy for people that Indira Gandhi did not remove democracy but that stupid Sanjay put all this Nasbandi into the thing, and that's how it is. Otherwise, people would have accepted. See, after all, South has accepted. All right. So I would not go by that. The second thing you had said is about
CFD. Congress
yeah.
for Democracy.
Well, I mean, listen, at that time, Jagjeevan Ram was the one who moved the resolution for the state of emergency.
Right.
And we brought him out. And, he didn't even say, I'm sorry, I apologize for doing nothing. We brought him in. And one of the people who were for it is Mr. Vajpayee because Jagjeevan Ram was for Vajpayee being made Deputy Prime Minister, which neither Charan Singh nor Moraji accepted. So I don't go about all that. Why did we take that? They were already taken the big deal. I don't think that it fundamentally changed the character of the people's thinking because Jagjeevan Ram came. It's only the thing is that the atmosphere of fear watered down a little. So therefore, there are all these ways where the Indian people's commitment to democracy is being watered down and to be made into something else. And we have to be beware of it. I think it was people understood that this is what we need. This is the democracy that, for us, that is what will make us safe. And so they voted for democracy.
I think, Arvind, it is about an hour. You may wind up because there are a lot of questions, but I think each topic is as interesting as the other.
I think Ramesh had hinted about that question because some of the question when in the morning we were tweeting that Dr. Swami is going to talk about emergency. The many people who asked on the Twitter that what about undeclared emergency of today? And the ED is being misused, the CBI is being misused, people are put into fear. Akhilesh Yadav did not even go to Azamgarh to campaign. And people say Akhilesh Yadav was told not to go. Mayawati was told not to campaign for her candidate in Rampur. I mean, Azamgarh. These are the things which suggest that there is some kind of fear among the politicians, if not general public.
We're just seeing a repetition, Dr. Arvindji. It's just, we are slowly seeing a repetition. I guess they're learning the lesson from, it worked, then let's again try to create a sense of fear and see what happens. Because once you start losing control, the best thing people start using is fear, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when you lose democratic and really a good approach with the people, I mean, we see, because I think the fear sets in because they're having lost Punjab, and losing one election or the year or the other is causing some kind of an uneasiness. It's not that earlier the aura was Modi the undefeatable, so that is getting
Even UP, the margins have been very small. If you look at the UP figures.
And UP is purely because of Yogi, Dr. Swami. I mean, nothing more.
Whatever it is, but even he has a very narrow margin.
Margins. Yeah, and I think that is creating a sense. I mean, look at what we are seeing in Tamil Nadu, the disintegration of the one opposition party, ADMK. Look at that, the way that has disintegrated, and which has led to what we see today, Dr. Swami. I mean, openly threatening, and you've got a case coming up. Probably we'll discuss one of these days about this this genocide of Brahmins. What kind of nonsense that is? I mean, you've made inept opposition in every state that, you have some kind of an alliance or thing in at a national level or a state level, even if you look at the states that they are no one, be it West Bengal, there are very few states left that can really oppose the BJP in some form, shape or the other. So in a way, it is, as Arvind said, it is a soft emergency that we don't realize. And it is being masked by pure hype and marketing day in and day out. Just tom-tomming, man ki baat, and this and that, and just people just getting uneducated people and IT cell idiots, doing non-stop 24/7 marketing, a bunch of monkeys sitting in some place. That's what it is. It's just fascinating. No opposition. Like even this comment that we make or whatever we discuss, tomorrow, Dr. Swami, you'll be termed, you're a CIA agent, you're a KGB agent, Chinese agent, every agent possible, so that it is the sad reality. But because educated brains is idiots, and as you always said, it's the uneducated people who know facts in the field, they vote for the right people. These educated morons are the ones that elected Indira Gandhi back then. They're going to repeat the same thing now. Sorry, Arvind, I had to conclude this in a different way.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Swami. I mean, emergency is an issue which this generation does not know much of, and especially people who are born after 90s. They have no inkling of what people had seen and experienced. And it is people like you who can bring it to highlight people and bring these things to light. And our key question today was how to prevent it to happening from the future. And naturally, there have to be people with a spine who can stand against the dictatorial regime, and those who can oppose the negative things being done by the government, whether it is BJP government or whether it is any other government for that matter. And it is people who have to stand up against the dictatorial policies of the government. Thank you, Dr. Swami, for spending time and recalling the black days of 1975 to 1977. You, of course, had mentioned very briefly, maybe in some other time in August, we have discussed in past that how you appeared in the parliament and disappeared again. I remember in earlier episode we had discussed about this, and we had a special program in Habitat Center in Delhi. Thank you, Jagdish. Thank you, Ramesh Swami. Thanks the technical team led by Ashish Chetty, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Swaminathan, Tejas, Naval Gul, Vishal Mehta, and Najesh Nair. We will be meeting again on 3rd of July next Sunday for 162nd episode of Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga with Dr. Swami, with a new topic and maybe perhaps a new guest. Thank you very much, viewers, for supporting us. We'll be meeting next Sunday, 8 p.m. in Gyan Ganga. Till then, namaskar, Jai Hind.
Dhanyavad. Thank you.
You'll be saying wow every time you use this towel.
Welcome to Dr. TSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shivaprasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab, hello. Once again, we are back with Hyderabad Democracy Forum. Many calls were there stating that yesterday's Subramania Swami's show was on this link. But believe me, we could sort it out. The same link we are doing live. Though they were trying to penetrate, and don't get confused even if they try to add yesterday's video also. Today's video will be very clearly marked out, in the sense it is starting afresh. Again, we are recording it also, so don't worry. And thanks to you for your vigil. You have been noticing it, how these people try to hack a genuine show. Since yesterday night when we have announced this show in regards to the flooding in Assam, we have been receiving various good Samaritans, I don't say whistleblowers, but those concerned minds. They have been trying to share their concerns. The concerns were, because I have my Guru, Professor Purushottam Reddy Garu, Guru Tulyulu Subbarao, and a wonderful guest in Rituraj Phukan from Assam. Yesterday I was relating them what he is. He is of international repute, like my gurus. And we are doing a show as per rule of law. There is no question of running helter-skelter. Few points I will try to bring it to the notice of the viewers of the world, because these questions have been arised from NRIs. They state Assam floods has nothing to do with Indian climate. It is directly related to China. First thing. Our communist and Congress controlled media intellectuals never share how China destroying Tibetan Himalayan ecosystem for decades. CNU opens up debates only when Chinese soldiers cross into Indian territories, but they never tell us how Chinese are causing flooding in Northeast. I think some cross this thing. I think if you can mute yourself so that this voice will be clear. The next thing these our good friends from America raised was China reversed the Tibetan reverse nature flow. This you have to remember. China reversed the Tibetan reverse nature flow inwards into their desert lands, causing lot of stress to Tibetan river system. If we look at our northeast flooding for past 5 decades, every time Assam floods immediately whenever huge rainfall in China. In this way, China directly controls Brahmaputra flows towards Himalayan plateau. As long as we fight among ourselves on Krishna Godavari waters with vexed regional interest, we never open up ourselves how to interlink Brahmaputra or Indus or Ganga with Krishna and Godavari. They don't understand. If you link these rivers, our country will dash, because water and elephant will never miss their path. So I have responded to them with the blessings of my Guru. Brahmaputra birth in Tibet, China occupied territory, not from China or mainland China. If I am wrong, you can correct me. It is in the northeast Himalayas. And Brahmaputra in Tibet is eco-friendly. Kindly assess, I said. Did you assess micro-hydel projects in 6 states where Brahmaputra is flowing? When you compare it to Tibet, why landslides are occurring? Then this is at 5,600 meters height. And it traverses Brahmaputra 3,000 kilometers, snow-cladded mountains. Then can we disturb it by having check dams, road expansions, hydel power projects? And who is investing there in the form of hydel power projects? From where is this money coming from? This has to be borne in the mind. If you disturb the nature, nature will come back to you in a much harsher way. This we have seen in Uttarakhand and all those regions. But still, floods control in Himalayan north and northeastern regions, as it starts from Bhutan, 1400 kilometers. Can the floods be controlled? Bhutan alone, 1400 kilometers Brahmaputra runs. Then Nepal. Then it enters India, Arunachal Pradesh, Guwahati, Assam, Ganges and Bangladesh. Now you tell me whether your assertion was factful, because we try to give you only facts. Then you say, I requested them, request your attention for tomorrow's live show. That means today's live show, wherein guests from Assam, international and national repute, and all the other guests who have enormous experience in environment, climate change and biodiversity, they will be participating. And then again, I said, correct yourself because you are trying to attribute isms. I said, hope attributes to some isms is disheartening as TRPR channels 2 years since it has been launched have pursued independent line as per rule of law, constitution, invoking evidential act with wonderful knowledgeable guests participating, and every data is on record. And I requested them, request your participation to share your thoughts and evidences for a comprehensive approach in larger public interest to mitigate the present problem which is there in Assam and the other northeastern states, while planning to avert or prevent such in the future as precious lives, property, environment matters for us. Then lastly I said, and this is what the last one, Himalayas topography, Brahmaputra origin and human greed to disturb nature, etc. Kindly understand the Himalayas and the topography of Brahmaputra, this origin, and how our human greed, it should have been need, but how our human greed has destroyed the nature. That is why we see all this. And then we said, Krishna Godavari in a simple way, if you want, follow international conventions on river water sharings. But why it is not happening? That is why we said Telangana has been created, or whatever you say. It was union to form Andhra Pradesh. Now we came out of the union because of this. Even after Telangana, why Krishna River basin is left to go dry? South Telangana deprived of its allotted share of waters. This is what I have told them. And again I told them, Kaleshwaram on Godavari, Krishna on this southern side. Are we sharing the allotted waters? If so, where is the data? And if that is the case, why the government is silent when even the remotest village, entire land is being converted into real estates? What happened to lakhs of rupees of investments into projects? We clearly said follow international or national conventions in river sharing so that there will not be any problem if it is transparent and accountable. And then we said invest on water harvesting, sensitizing people so that this conservative approach will help us to overcome whatever water shortages or flooding or whatever it is. Yes, sir. I think now the floor is yours, Subbarao Garu. Unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shiv Prasad Garu, and welcome to Professor Purushottam Reddy, Sanjay Asthana, Dr. Mallesh, and our honorable guest, Rituraj Phukan. And this is the second time that Mr. Rituraj Phukan is addressing through our channel, and it is an honorable event for us. And before I introduce him, he was trained personally in Istanbul in 2013 and had opportunity to meet Mr. Al Gore while mentoring at New Delhi 2015 on other virtual trainings. A speaker once interacted with Mr. Al Gore on a science panel question once and at a virtual town hall another time. He got featured in book An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power in 2017. He delivered over 350 presentations and featured in documentaries, magazines, interviews, and written hundreds of articles. He was invited to speak in UK, US, Canada, South Africa, say North America, Africa, and South America, Europe, and Asia, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Philippines. And he was also honored at University of Glasgow, Stanford University, Dhaka University, National Institute of Design, NID, Ahmedabad, and ILS Law College, IIM Shillong, and Management Symbiosis Institute. And finally, last but not least, MCH RDI, Hyderabad. Thank you so much. And this is here with, introduce our guest. And he is focusing on climate change issues and impact on hydrological systems and lives of the people. All his talks and writings and his attempt is to bring to the limelight on the impact on the poor, impact on the people, impact on the tribal sections of this country. Interestingly and challengingly, Brahmaputra River is controlled more than 85% structural. All its travel from Bhutan, its origin from Manas Lake, Kailash Parvat, to northeast region where it takes a U-turn, it is 100% controlled. It's a straight line. As an hydrologist and an hydrogeologist and a satellite imagery man, I can say very confident. Then takes a U-turn. Rivers will never flow in straight lines. Takes a U-turn, enters into India, Arunachal Pradesh, and then to Assam, and then to Bangladesh. All its journey of 3,900 square kilometers, kilometer journey. It is almost, it receives something 8 different names. And finally, Padma in Bangladesh. It's a wonderful thing. And Brahmaputra is referred only when it enters into Assam. It has beautiful. This river basin is geo-bioclimatic diversity and fragile and sensitive. It gives, it nurtures the life across, right from the wildlife like rhinoceros in Kaziranga and wild elephants. It's wonderful traveling on that highway of Kaziranga. So it's geoclimatic conditions. The only thing which a lot of information comes out on its geoclimatic and geobiodiversities, but very little information is available on climatic variations. It starts at the height of 5,200 meters and joins at 0 in Bangladesh, Bay of Bengal. People talk all kinds, but one thing, this is one river, a mighty river, which has a lot of rapids, and it's a dynamic. Its movement is so dynamic, from 5,000 meters to 0, it's wonderful to experience traveling along the river. So I request and invite our chief guest, Mr. Rituraj Phukan, to deliver his talk highlighting on impact of climate change, biodiversity. And he is also the national coordinator for biodiversity. And the floor is yours, sir. Mr. Rituraj.
Thank you, Dr. Subbarao, and thank you to Dr. Siva Prasad Reddy as well as Professor Purushottam Reddy, sir. It's such an honor to be back here on this channel. I remember last year we did one show, and thank you for taking up this most important topic, which is touching the lives of everybody here in Assam. And it's so important that the news of this flood is heard by the sufferings of the people and all the interconnected climate change impacts are heard by the people of the world. And as you have rightly pointed out, there are so many issues interconnected with that. I'm going to just deliver my basic understanding of what is happening. Firstly, let me just give a brief about climate change in Northeast India. as you all are well aware, the Northeast comprises of mostly hilly states, 8 hilly states of Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, and then Tripura, Manipur, and Assam, which have hills and valleys both, right? And the entire region is located in the eastern Himalayan region, which is one of the fastest warming places on the planet. And this northeastern region is drained by basically 2 big river systems. We always talk about the Brahmaputra, but there is also the Barak. Now you are hearing about the Assam flood. You are looking at pictures and videos of Silchar town, for example. That is not due to the Brahmaputra, that's due to the Barak River flooding. So there is flooding going on in the Brahmaputra Valley, and there is flooding going on in the Barak Valley as well. And the current situation is that in the Brahmaputra Valley, the waters are receding a bit, and whereas in many parts of the Barak Valley, including Silchar city, many parts are still inundated, and people are still facing very hard conditions. This entire northeastern region is very much prone to natural hazards and flooding. Everybody knows, but we also have things like riverbank erosion, landslide. Then we have earthquake. I remember last year was a record-breaking year in terms of earthquake. We had at least 50 or so from April onwards. And then we have a lot of other effects like rainstorms and very intense wind also during the month. So this area lies in the core of the southwest monsoon zone, and it makes this climate change impacts very intense and very complex and uncertain. So what is happening in the Himalayas or the eastern Himalayas, particularly in the upper Brahmaputra river basin, which is essentially the basin of the river Yarlung Jangbo, as pointed out. It's known as by different names. The Brahmaputra is known as the Yarlung Jangbo or the Sangpo in Tibet, where the majority of it flows before taking a U-turn, as Subbarao sir had pointed out, into India. And the entire stretch of the Brahmaputra in Assam is very much prone to flooding. Now, let us quickly look at how much has the region warmed. According to the Hindu Kush Himalaya assessment, which was published in the year 2019, the entire Himalayan region has already warmed by about 1.3 degrees Celsius, which is way over, nearly double for most, compared to most other parts of the world. And as a consequence, it is projected that the eastern Himalayan region will lose about 95% of its glaciers at the current rates of warming. And even if we are to somehow limit this warming to the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius, we'll still lose about 2/3 of these glaciers by 2100 if the region warms by 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the interesting thing here is that since you have already warmed by 1.3 degrees Celsius, that means we might lose up to 50% of these glaciers over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And I personally feel that perhaps we are seeing that manifestations already in the increased flood that is happening. Of course, just like the Indian Himalayan region, the Tibetan region through which the Brahmaputra flows has also undergone considerable warming. According to one report that I have here, during 1960 to 2000, the rate of warming in Tibet was 0.226 degrees Celsius per decade, which was higher than the global trend, which was like 0.03 to 0.06. So it's way many times higher. And it was way higher than what was happening in other parts of China as well. Now, Chinese scientists have found that the temperature is increasing even more alarmingly in the Yarlung-Changbu, the Tsangpo River, the upper Brahmaputra basin. And during 1971 to 2003, warming over the basin of this Yarlung-Changbu was at least 0.30 degrees Celsius per decade. These are all published studies from the Chinese scientists, which is significantly higher than the average annual temperature rise over India. So the upper reaches of the upper Brahmaputra basin has also warmed very much faster than the rest of the world, leading to perhaps much more glacial melt in those Tibetan areas which feed the Yarlung-Changbu in the first place. And all that water, and when it comes down from the hills, it floods the valleys of the Brahmaputra and in Assam. Even within the Brahmaputra basin, of course, we have records of how much it has warmed. Now, if we look at the long-term temperature data for Northeast India, there is increased temperature rises, and in at least 4 states of Northeast, we are also seeing a decrease in the forest cover. You must have seen that the Forest Survey of India, published recently, some months back, pointed out an overall increase in the green cover for India, right? But in the Northeast, some states have shown a decreasing trend. So that means that things like decrease in the forest cover is also contributing to this flood, some of which are referred to as flash floods, and then it is also leading to landslides. In parts of Guwahati, for example, which was flooded very recently, a lot of forest cover has been lost in the hills due to encroachments. Encroachment means the forest cover, trees have been cut, and that leads again to landslides, and people have died there for many years. We have seen a lot of incidents have been increasing, and this year was no different. Also, now another interesting study is the changing rainfall regime in this area. So the average annual precipitation decreased between the 1960s and the 1980s in the Yarlung-Changpo basin, but it has been increasing since the 1980s. So on an average, the annual and seasonal precipitation has gone up in the upper Brahmaputra basin. That in Tibet, for example, during 1960 to 2005, at the rate of 6.75 millimeter per decade. So the studies in different rainfall regime in Northeast India also indicate very significant trends. It is increasing in some areas and it is decreasing in some areas. During my childhood, Assam was, very predictably known as a land of continuous rainfall. It used to drizzle continuously for many, many days, sometimes even many weeks at a time. Constant light rainfall. That has almost vanished. It's become very rare now. And now we have this huge sudden burst of rainfall, which continues for a short period of time, but it is very intense with a huge, large volume of water coming down within a short time. That has been well studied, and very recently various reports have come out which have looked at how much actually such rainfall has increased. In Meghalaya, for example, an entire year's rainfall fell down in a matter of few days, very recently. Similar was case in the Dima Hasao district, where you saw the images of the train station being flooded and trains being bumped over by the mudslide. And we have had a lot of other infrastructural damage as well. I live in Nagaon, and my city was first breached this year when one culvert was washed away during the floods last month, and during this wave, the floodwaters have actually entered many parts of the city. Luckily, not where I live, but just about 150 meters from my house, there's a small rivulet where the water levels are touching the bridges, and because my side is, the embankment road is higher, it has not spilled over this side, but the other side, there is flooding. So just about 200 meters, 150 meters to the river, and then like 50 meters would be the width of the river, and then on the other side there is flood within the city. So these drastic changes in precipitation patterns is something that is also a contributory factor to these floods. Definitely, our infrastructure that was built decades or maybe many decades back was not built to withstand these kind of weather anomalies. If we get 1 year's rainfall in just 4 or 5 days or a week, then definitely we are going to see a lot of infrastructural damage. We are going to see a lot of bridges been, culverts been washed away, house collapses, landslides, the roads breaking up. All this will be expectedly becoming more common. Unfortunately, the projections that we have for the northeastern region or for the entire eastern Himalayan are not good, based on the glacial meltwater increase that is expected from warming. The volume of water is likely to increase in the Brahmaputra and all the tributaries, and because the rainfall patterns are changing, we are going to see intense rainfall in certain areas in a certain point of time. So that is going to cause more and more flash floods in the short term. And in the long term, we might also see water scarcity. I know this is something, when we are talking about floods, it is just unimaginable that this area can actually suffer from water scarcity in the future. But according to a data-driven projection made in 2017 about the 5 river valley systems which are most likely to see water wars in the future, one of the places mentioned was the Brahmaputra Ganga Valley. So definitely that is a manifestation of climate change impact. I know at the beginning of this talk, there was this discussion about how people are saying that it is not due to climate change or it is due to some other reason, but definitely the science doesn't point to such such discourses. There's a scientific, I think the scientific consensus here is pretty clear that because the upper Brahmaputra basin has warmed so much, because the Chinese scientists have also pointed out the warming in the Tibetan region, our scientists have already well documented in a series of studies about the impact on the third polar region, the Himalayan region, and especially the eastern Himalayas. We can definitely attribute that the increased intensity and frequency of floods in Assam is definitely exacerbated by climate change impact. I'll be very happy to take up this discussion forward. If somebody has any questions, maybe we can take this up. Thank you.
అన్నా మీరేమన్నా అడుగుతున్నారా? ప్రొఫెసర్ పురుషోత్తం రెడ్డి, ఐఎమ్ ఆస్కింగ్. Please unmute your mic.
Yeah, at the outset, I wish to compliment my friend Rituraj Phukan for the scientifically, wonderful explanation. And I agree with him that whatever is happening, definitely it's all because of climate change. But the climate is changing because of our human activities, what we call Anthropocene impact, human-induced activity, particularly during the last 70 years after independence. Earlier also, that particular region was a witness to massive plantations. Assam is world famous for tea gardens. But then that also means we have interfered with the local forestry. We have destroyed a lot of biodiversity and we went in for plantations. Definitely that also has its very serious implications, which we normally tend to ignore. Recently I witnessed urbanization in the valleys of Ooty, down south in Tamil Nadu. And there I was shocked to see the kind of housing and human activity, urbanization in all the valleys there. At one point of time, Ooty was wonderful. But today, if you go there, in the entire Eastern Ghats and the meeting point of East and Western Ghats, in all the valleys, you see real estate activity. They call it real estate, but it is nothing but destruction of the hills. Ghat roads are being laid, plots are being sold. I'm sure this may be the scenario in the Northeast also. You have to throw light on what's happening regarding the so-called modernization and how many dams have been built and what consequences. What are we doing to the mountainous ecosystem, the forestry? So definitely, in addition to the certain things which are not in our control, for example, global warming leading to climate change at the global level, that is something no single country can address. But whereas in India, whatever the governments, whichever parties we are not worried, but governments are governments and they play to the tunes of the corporates. As a result, a very negative, destructive, damage-causing model has been promoted in the name of development. And throughout the length and breadth of India, this is what is happening. I think the same may be the design in the Northeast also. I request my friend Rituraj to please explain to us what's happening.
Yes, unfortunately, sir, you are right. Many of the reservoirs here are forced to release their water, adding to the flood. In fact, in Nagaon district, despite the fact that we did not have rain for over a week, the waters continued to rise. And it is because of a dam in the Karbi Anglong area where the authorities had to open the gate of the reservoir to release the water because of the heavy rainfall in the hills was putting pressure on the dam. Definitely that is a strategy that has led to floods in many parts of Assam in the past as well. In fact, there's something called glacial lake outburst floods, and then there's also the landslide dam outburst flooding, which has happened several times in Bhutan. In the last 25 years, several incidents have happened. We remember there was a floods in Phunsoling in the year 2000, and then the various incidents happened in 2004, 2015, 16, 17, which were related to similar kind of landslide, dam burst, flooding. These are recent images actually, from Assam. And even within China, there has been all this flash floods. A huge complex landslide had occurred in April 2000 in the valley of Jamulongba stream. That produces a huge, about 300 million cubic meters of, debris that created a kind of dam. And then later, after rainfall, the dam failed, and then it could cause the flash flood in the Siang Basin, and that was left about 50,000 people homeless. So many such disasters happened in Siang, again in Arunachal Pradesh, and the Brahmaputra River in Assam was also flooded because of landslides in the Tibetan area in 2017. So this being a Zone 5 earthquake-prone area, I think these large dams that have been built are a disaster waiting to happen. At any time, we could be exposed to damage that we cannot even imagine. We could be looking at, some disasters which may be beyond what we have seen till now. Because we keep hearing about damage to some of these large dams that have taken place. Even this year, they were talking about the Lower Subansari reservoir have been filled up, and then there have been a lot of structural damage. Thankfully, nothing happened yet to the dam itself. But imagine if an earthquake were to happen, adding to the pressure of the water in the reservoir, and that could really be disastrous for the downstream people. And that is something that probably was not considered. I know the government has repeatedly said that they have considered all the factors, but at the same time, there have been a lot of discrepancies while sanctioning these dams because public consultation was not done properly. The environment impact assessment reports show that the reports about biodiversity, for example, were not at all done, with the right attitude. They were basically copy pasted from some other region. So definitely this planning of dams in this northeast region, earthquake-prone northeastern area, is probably going to be very disastrous in the future.
Sir, we have Professor Sanjay Asthana. I request Professor to please join the discussion. Please unmute, sir.
Yeah, hi there. I'm just listening to the presentation here. It's just, quite bothersome to sort of see the global connections, what's happening in Assam has happened in the US, parts of US is also happening elsewhere. And it's something that, is truly not just a regional or a local event, but it is sort of cascading into widespread South Asia. If you look at the regional context of South Asia, SAARC countries, facing the same issues, Bangladesh, for instance, and also Sri Lanka, Pakistan. So there are similarities that you can sort of sketch within the South Asian region, but also wider global context. So I just wanted to, I've been listening intently to the presentation by Mr. Phukan and also listening to other comments. Thank you.
Subbarao-ji, please.
Yeah, the most important thing which I was observing for last more than a decade and all, because my batchmates were from Assam, and we did our studies from Roorkee. The last I visited Jorhat is in 2005. One thing I'm looking at is this entire region is a global common. See, we are not addressing or appealing to the international media or to the international community on the relevance, importance of sensitive global commons. This is a highly sensitive fragile ecosystem which deserves the attention of the entire global community. Some discussions happened at Copenhagen between China and India during the S.A. Krishna's period. He was external minister. And, some 15 minutes debate on the 510 megawatt project, which was, sited at the U-turn of Brahmaputra. And the China claimed that all the waters it will take back north. They were talking as if they are working on granite stabilized, tectonic systems. Entire Himalayas is a fragile and rock formation, sedimentary formation. And the elevation difference is almost 520 meters. One drop of water coming from Manas Sarovar down the lane can create a landslide. And the kind of disaster management departments among the 6 sister states, what I see, does not have any capacities in themselves. And as you rightly pointed out, Mr. Ritu, even the public participation, it's only an eyewash. So we need to look into it, put more pressure on the global commons, particularly when we are talking on climate change. It needs an global solidarity. It's not, between one country and the other country, what we are talking and, what we did for the Kosi River with Bihar NGOs, with Nepal NGOs. It's different here. And I'm sure that the government might not have come out with any report on loss of biodiversity because of climate change, because of, the man-made disasters. And myself and Professor Purushottam Reddy had the opportunity of conducting a training workshop for NEPCO engineers in 2015 for 3 weeks on 3 different subjects. I invite you for, a second, a webinar. I request my friend Dr. Shiv Prasad on this. We have collected not less than 8 video films of the local areas for this training workshop. And to my shock, the companies like Nagarjuna Constructions, which cannot even construct a proper structure in Hyderabad, has been given on the sensitive slope sites.
Heights.
What is that we expect a result from that?
Heights of
I have
construction.
a video
Yep.
wherein one of the Assami activists was, expressing his anxiety and the concern. One of the tunnels was driven in the wrong direction for 3 kilometers.
Goodness.
After 3 kilometers, he realized it's the wrong direction and his GPS was wrong and started, again drilling on the other direction. I'm sure they have not filled up that entire tunnel. You can imagine the kind of moisture leakage in a cracked crevices will aggravate the landslides. We do not have expertise, we are only thinking. And more than, I think, 35 bridges are constructed just before the elections also. And, tourism. They have exploited the oil to the maximum. And now they want to exploit all the so-called tourism. Yeah. So these are the issues, and what I feel is, this is the time for us to bring out, people's voice at the SARC level.
True.
Good or bad, India is the leader. We have to think of this.
Sir, you are the presenter. You can show that video.
And then I don't. I want to show one slide actually. Only one slide I want to show. Can you see this, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can make it full screen, sir.
Yes, we can see.
Oh, this is the. You can see the entire from left west to east. The Brahmaputra flows in an almost straight line and suddenly takes a U-turn to enter into India. And even in the final leg, it is a straight perpendicular line. Only between the Golpara and Dibrugarh, it takes some kind of a different shape. So this clearly tells us that this is a controlled river system. And many people are talking these days on where do I find you again? Yeah. I'm not able to connect you again. I don't know why.
You are there, sir. You are still the presenter.
I'm there?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is one. The other one I would like to show, just for, how people make all kinds of wrong allegations and then come out with long. Another important issue, what I was feeling is, Mr. Rituraj, there is no mention of any outburst of the glacial lakes in this region, and we do not have any record. And interestingly, this is the video, sent by NRIs from USA, blaming us that what we are talking is wrong, and what they have, their claim is it is because of China. The whole floods are happening in India. I'll just show for 4 minutes and then we'll get back.
You can make it full screen.
Is this video from this year, sir?
You can make it full screen, sir. This corner you have.
I think I saw it last year or the year before that.
That is last June, sir.
So here you can click the right extreme right. You click, sir. It will be entire screen. Subarao garu. You go to the beginning.
No, I do not understand how do they justify that rainfall in China or floods in China has any effect at all on what is happening here.
No,
You see, they
they were of the
had
impression that we are trying to divert the attention and blaming the governments. Subarao garu, here, yeah, Rituraj, you can comment now.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely it is important that people realize that these effects are happening not just in one global hotspot, which the Eastern Himalayas is, but it is also happening in other regions. Like rightly pointed out, we have seen floods in Europe last year, unprecedented landslides in Germany, across Spain, Italy. So many countries experience floods. The US, and then we are also seeing flooding in China. So that doesn't in any way take away from the fact that all these are manifestations of climate change impact. And why would anyone blame the government for it? Because the government is not adding to the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere directly, maybe on a policy level, maybe because of inaction. But that is not the current government. I mean, it could be inaction that has happened continuously for several decades, because the climate science has been clear for a long, long time. And the IPCC is in the 27th or 28th year now. So at least for 28 years, nearly 3 decades, the government around the world, not just in India, have to be blamed for ignoring the signs that climate change is emerging as a massive threat to the global economy, to the lives and livelihoods of people.
So, I think you have answered them. The economy and the greed, and not heeding to climate change patterns and warnings. So this is over decades. Now it continued by this legacy, this government too. So we're not blaming any one government here, but successively close to 3 decades of our efforts.
Okay. During the United Nations climate conference, COP26 at Glasgow last year, G77 nations, along with, in fact, China, had demanded a Glasgow loss and damage facility through which historical emitters, that means countries which have industrialized countries which have historically caused the maximum damage since the Industrial Revolution with the massive amounts of emissions, they would have to pay poorer countries for as remedy for the loss and damage caused by climate disasters like the floods in Assam. Now, countries have now agreed in principle to support affected and vulnerable communities with the resources for a just transition, including finances for such losses. But unfortunate thing here is that the governments, the people, not only Assam, but I think as a country, we are failing to project us as the areas which need climate justice. For example, when it comes to climate change, I think Assam must rank among the early impacted regions of the world. In the past few years, we see people talking about, headlines of what floods will happen, people will get displaced, and there will be conflict. But in Assam, we have already seen that for many decades now. So the development aspirations of people have been blocked. It have not succeeded in any of the SDGs, for example, and in fact, people have been pushed back into poverty because they have lost agricultural lands, they have lost livelihoods, they have lost, school children have lost many school hours and days, and have been forced to abandon schooling. So all this has led to more impoverishment of people. that makes us very much right there in the center of the demand for climate justice. The government and the people and activists together, place this demands on the global arena during the negotiations, like the COP negotiations, during the climate action negotiations. So that is something I think is not happening. I think that's the failure of, I wouldn't say just the government, of civil society, of us activists. I think all of us are to blame for not being able to project frontline communities in India, including flood victims in Assam, cyclone victims in Odisha, drought victims in central India, landslide victims in the Himalayas, in the forefront of the climate justice and loss and damage demands.
Yeah, I wish to add one point. As my friend B.V. Subbarao rightly pointed out, these are all very fragile ecosystems, particularly Himalayas and northeast of India. And as we have rightly pointed out, these are global, they should be considered as global commons.
Yeah.
And in the United Nations, we have these organizations, Prince of the UN. We have the United Nations Trusteeship Council. Right now they are just, focusing on refugees because of war and all that. They are doing a good job, but that is a very limited activity. Because the environmental issues were not foreseen at the time of formation of UN. And now that this is a reality, and UN itself has been organizing so many global conferences, as you rightly pointed out, just on the subject of climate change. Approximately about 26 conferences, COPs, and the 27th will be very soon. Now the question is, why can't UN itself undergo some reforms? And in fact, on this issue also, there have been quite a few focused discussions, and the United Nations itself should be transformed, or reform should take place. And we have been very vocal. Quite a few times we have been demanding that the United Nations Trusteeship Council, it should be made responsible for the protection of the global commons, which includes North Pole, South Pole, all very important ecosystems like the Himalayas, the Amazon River, and all the oceans, because no single country is in a position to take care of them. And they pose, and moreover, for example, Himalayas, we have all, I don't know how many countries, China, right from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and we look at the number of countries. And again, these are not the only, so I strongly feel that there should be reforms in the UN, and Trusteeship Council its role should be expanded to include the protection of the global commons.
I totally agree, sir. At COP26 last year, for the first time in the history of the UNFCCC, 28 indigenous people were nominated from each of the 7 United Nations indigenous socio-cultural regions to engage directly as knowledge partners and share their indigenous expertise with governments. And so basically governments recognize the important role of indigenous people in addressing and responding to climate change. And the Glasgow Climate Pact, which was finally signed, also called for developed nations to at least double their collective provisions of climate finance for adaptation by 2025. So these deliberations of loss and damage that I talked about earlier, they are going to be the main focus in COP27 this year in Egypt. And for the first time, they are going to talk about food as a primary driver of ensuring climate justice. So I think it's going to be very interesting because now they're going to look at ensuring adequate local food.
We lost your voice, sir.
Climate justice. If indigenous communities, people are deprived of their traditional food habits, the access to the foods that they have been sustainably using for, hundreds and thousands of years, then that makes them liable to get climate justice. So I think these are the areas where, even civil society and our government should focus to ensure that we are part of that, loss and damage conversation. And whenever the funds are available, the people's development aspirations, which have been deprived due to events like the Assam floods, are actually addressed, and we are able to provide the basic necessities. And then, without that, the SDGs will definitely not be achieved by 2030. By the way, sir, one point I must make here: the SDG report 2022, which was published last month, out of the 17 goals, India has done well only in 2 goals. I mean, India is on track to achieve just 2 of the 17 goals, and one of them is climate action. That is goal number 13. Right. Yeah, and the other one is goal number 12. That is responsible consumption. So responsible consumption and production. So these are the only 2 goals where India is on track to maintaining the SDG achievement.
Who gave this report?
This is the UN report.
UN report. You see, when I can't afford an edible oil, I'm bound to go under the consumption levels. Okay?
The overall rank.
I'm looking in that particular perspective, and now I have some certain pertinent burning questions, not for you, but for every one of us. Okay, and the second one you said climate action. Okay, how many of your 6 states produced the climate action reports? Is it available in the colloquial language? No. I know that the institution in Hyderabad is doing all the action reports for the Northeast region, hired by MOEF. Can we accept this? So you said, copy-paste things. And the second thing, this is such a sensitive zone as far as the biodiversity is also concerned. Do we have, I'm eager, I just started going through all the government departments at different places, that how many established biodiversity registers are available in Assam state? And forest department has left its responsibility on climate and forest growth.
Yes.
And minor forest produce has the direct linkage with the livelihood of the tribals. It could be cane, it could be bamboo, it could be tamarind, it could be anything on that. When the climate change has an impact on the growth and flowering of the forest species, where are the reports? You see, I argue with the government officers and the politicians to influence them. I think the population of Northeast regions can sit happily for generations on the patent rights of the biodiversity? Yes or no? Lot of herbal, medicinal, rare plant species have been, siphoned out by the companies. Yes or no?
Yes.
Are we not deprived? You see, sometimes I feel, I was wondering in 89 and 90s, 91, when a man like me is asked to sit in the first commission on sustainable development. I was wondering why they are asking me. It's only tamasha in the UN. Bring the native people, make them to show before the media, siphon out all the knowledge, give it to corporate sector. The Northeast region, for that matter, Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, the Narmada, Tapadi valleys. Are there any reports of the herbal things and how the climate change is affecting their fruiting, flowering, and growth, and in turn the livelihood of tribals? Kuch nahi. You see, even I sometimes I feel very sad. The climate change groups and all, they say, I did 120 rainwater harvesting structures, such and such company give. That's only one part of our activity. The major part which I understood from Al Gore is bring a policy change. Bring a policy change, sensitize the people, make them to realize the value of their resources. How the climate change is depriving their livelihoods. That is most important. What I feel, this is my concern, and I try to do it whenever I get the opportunity. Okay. I never had the opportunity of working with only on the other, I think 2 months back. Who is that? Professor Purushottam Reddy, who came here on the local governing bodies. The central ex-cabinet minister. Shiv Prasad Reddy, you know him on the Panchayat Raj, he came to Hyderabad.
Yeah. Last time. Yes.
Yeah.
He is our
this is where
ex-minister.
Rituraj, I'm impressed with your writings. And writings I have not read, but your YouTubes and other lectures and all. I think it's time for us, people like us, to come together and sensitize the people on impact of climate change and impact and its direct impact on the loss of livelihood and the resources. This is most important, particularly in the Northeast and Northwest. It is not one single activity that is disturbing the whole gamut of the life systems.
It was Manishankar Iyer, sir. Manishankar Iyer.
Manishankar Iyer, okay. He was more popular in Northeast region.
I would like to add one or two. Yes, sir. Please go ahead, Subbarao.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead, sir.
So what we are looking at is, how do we bring this biodiversity, livelihoods, patent rights, climate change. You need not give me bridges. You give me patent rights, I will sit and eat at home. Translate and give me all my literature on biodiversity. Nobody is giving anything. Why is it when we are not able to create mechanisms of empowering the poor and the tribals, there is no point, उसको लेके आते हैं बड़े एक जैसे होता है ना उत्सव में रथ में भगवान का एक मूर्ति बिठा दे के खींच के ले जाते. That's becoming the status of. I'm sorry, I felt this. We need to think much more beyond that. Because the only question I asked Al Gore in 1992 at summit was, will you be able to ensure what you're talking once you become the president? He said no. situations, once I get into that seat, will be different. He was sure. That is the reason he opted for a parallel movement. Wonderful. And we need to think of all this, and then, unfortunately, many things we discuss at the international arena. Everything. Back home in India, ministers forget. Of course, people like you and me have a limited, resources to move on and do it. I understand that. But nevertheless, okay, let's come together, form, whatever we can, develop mechanisms to empower these tribals and arrest the climate change, improve the livelihoods of the people, make more green livelihoods for the deserving communities of the country. Thank you so much, and from my bottom of heart, I thank you that you accepted my invitation and joined second time, and I wish that you join us, and Professor Purushottam Reddy would like to.
Yeah, I have only one request to our friend Rituraj. Sir, since we all have met here, and we have a professor from United States, Sanjay Assam, and himself is an author and very popular. So my request is, maybe in July itself, let us all discuss, let us organize a webinar where we should be focusing, it should be like something like a forerunner on the eve of this COP27 with the civil society. I'm not saying we are totally representing all the people, but at least some of us, we can get together, maybe 100, 200 or 300 from different universities, activists, whoever is concerned, concerned citizens, let us all come together and try to, we need to focus what are our expectations from COP27. Otherwise, I notice government going there totally unprepared in a very casual manner. So let the governments also know that people are watching, citizens are demanding, and let them go to such conferences, having done their homework in this country. Otherwise, it is all just a few papers which are submitted by the digital bureaucracy in collision with the politics, and these are submitted there. So I request our friend Rituraj ji and my friend BVSR, let us all come together and organize a webinar, and I request Dr. Shiv Prasad Reddy to once again lend his channel for the purpose.
I'm ready, Anna. I'm ready to host it. And before we say bye, two fundamental things, as you always make me remind both of you, my gurus. When a policy change happens, or when a disaster like this, which has been shown 2013, 17 Assam, every 4 years I think there is a big disaster happening in Assam. How is that, whichever government, whether it is Congress, BJP, UP or NDA, how is that they are not able to take the suffering public into decision making, into the disaster management, right from panchayat, municipalities, corporations, or is there any discussion in the floor of assembly? And how can you at least avoid, see I have shown you on the screen now, 2013 there was a disaster, many people died, many properties lost, 17 same thing happened, now 2022 it is a repeat. And again when you try to expand the hilly areas and all sorts of things, and last time also we have shown how a train station has been constructed in the way of a river from hill. A river flows from a hill and down you are constructing a railway station. How they got washed away we have shown. How can, is this a intellectual brain drain or policy makers illogical thinking? That is one aspect. Why is that disasters keep happening, people are dying, properties are getting washed away in spite of this disaster occurring very regularly? What are the reasons? Did the government fail to understand the reasons so that they could not take the suffering public into policy making or decision making? Then there is a big announcement which make top to bottom. Nothing happens in India. Even when you go to COP or UN, there is no discussion in the panchayat level, corporation, municipalities level or assembly, or for that matter even Lok Sabha. All of a sudden they go there and announce. Similarly, entire northeastern regions, they say we will grow palm. What does that mean? Palm oil. That means you want to take away all these indigenous, which have been, as Subbarao Garu have been pointing out, give patent rights to all those northeastern state people of biodiversity so that they can lead a happy and comfortable life. One stretch, northeastern entire palm will be there. Now we have seen palm oil is not at all good for health. That is how the doctors came out now. How do you look at this scenario? Such a big policy change, northeastern states not involved.
Can I just make a comment, if you don't mind?
Sir, we are
Sanjay here.
Please, Sanjay Asthana ji, please,
Yeah.
you open your video
Yeah.
also so that the entire world will watch you.
For some reason, the video is not opening though. I'm trying to toggle with the GoToMeeting here app. Just a quick note about
Please.
you know, have a lifetime of expertise, lifetime of work. Professor Reddy, Subbarao Garu, you know, expert, Mr. Phukan, and you know, Doctor. All of you have been involved in that. But I, you know, feel that, you know, I've been reading about it, and I've been trying to inculcate some of the contemporary discussions, historical look at things. To me, it's an intergenerational question. We need to really think about the young people, how to develop sort of ways in which we can connect. And, you know, when I say we, the civil society, the political class and others. One thing that comes to mind as I was reading, you know, the riparian laws are used quite effectively in Europe and other parts of the world where, you know, if it is affecting the biodiversity and wetlands and other areas which, you know, people depend on their livelihoods, they have expanded the riparian laws to, I think, I'm not clear about it, but I've read somewhere that to the idea of the commons as in, you know, people's, you know, the water itself as an element, as not as an economic good, which the World Bank is, you know, sort of looking at in terms of the economic value of it, but as something that is a human right, something that is more connected to people's lives and livelihood. So that they have used the legal discourse. I think in Europe, in some country they have used it. Perhaps, you know, in Assam and the Seven Sisters, as they are called in the Northeast, right? The 7 states, which again, you know, a lot of wetlands and biodiversity area. Perhaps we can have a next time if you host a discussion. Perhaps I can bring some of those insights, ideas, and we can have a kind of a discussion. But involve the young people, particularly young people from the Northeast and from other parts of India, other parts of the world, where, you know, they're discussing and talking about some of these issues, which, you know, again is something that is a major issue which all of us are facing. So my plea would be to have an involvement of the young people, and Professor Reddy has been doing a superb work in terms of, you know, inculcating in the I think law schools where, you know, young people are sort of coming to the forefront, filing a PIL and, you know, RTI and other kinds of things, trying to push the envelope. So that's my, you know, 2 cents here. You know, look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thank you. Sanjay is the professor from Atlanta University in Communications Department. Presently, he is in Hyderabad doing some research work and a fellowship. And welcome your, you know, impressive suggestions. That yes, we should look for. Yes, we are looking for to hand over the baton to our young generation, so that they will continue the relay race. We were all doing the race and relays, but we need to do it, and we must hand over and looking for the youngsters. And I'm sure, you know, now Rituraj, you know, has a, you know, rich experience working at the ground level and can bring the youngsters, and we can also start an exclusive webinars addressing the youngsters. Thank you so much,
I hope
Rituraj.
Rituraj ji will. I think Rituraj ji will answer some of the things which we have raised, like palm and why these disasters keep happening. Why local population is not involved. Yep.
I just quickly add, well, natural disasters are just that, natural disasters. They will keep happening and they will worsen because of climate change impacts. Assam, by location, is in a disaster-prone area. So I'll not get into that, but regarding palm oil, yeah, definitely the government tried to push palm oil last year with the carrot of 100,000 crores investment dangling, and because the young people in Assam and Northeast India are very, very active in environmental issues for the long time. In fact, we have led massive movements, and last year we successfully managed to involve indigenous youth from all the states, all the 8 northeastern states, and the plan of expansion of palm oil in Northeast India now is in the back seat. So that is a huge success. And the year before that, we again, all the youth organizations, we organized at least, I myself was part of at least, I think 40 to 50 webinars, all by different youth here, protesting against the expansion of the coal mining license near the Dihing Patkai Wildlife Sanctuary. And that was a huge, that was a success. And in fact, the government this year upgraded that Dihing Patkai Wildlife Sanctuary to a national park, thereby also, ensuring better protective measures. So the youth in Northeast India have been very active, and I think we have been very successfully been able to mobilize this, especially with climate actions. I mean, we have branches of Extinction Rebellion and Fridays for Future very active now within many of these indigenous communities as well. But what I would take away from today's conversation, I think Dr. Subba Rao has very rightly pointed out that indigenous people we have definitely the biodiversity list and registers and impacts, all that, but we do not have the point of view of the indigenous peoples themselves. What are they losing? What is the biodiversity that they are losing? What is the culture that connects them to the biodiversity that is being affected by climate change? And that is something that I am personally working on with my group called the Indigenous Peoples Climate Justice Forum. So thank you very much once again to all of you. It's been such a pleasure to listen to you and share the dais with us, learned people, and all the information that we shared, I think it was very, very valuable. Thank you very much.
Yeah. This is for today. I hope people will understand we are not the last one on this Mother Earth planet. So look left and right, you have your own children. So you be selfish to safeguard this wonderful environment. Don't allow those illegal projects trying to destroy your nature, your environment. And you understand why these disasters are happening, why this climate change. Then everything will be, as rightly pointed out, will be peaceful and you can lead a comfortable life. Of course, yes, as he clearly stated, Assam being in the natural disaster zone, if you can understand how these disasters keep occurring, why they are occurring, and what to do, then believe me, you can save your precious lives, for that matter, property. We have shown you railway station being constructed in the river flow way, so naturally it gets washed away. How those engineering marvels have given such permissions. So they're all nothing but making mockery of our intellectual minds. So you be decisive. Every citizen is a constitutional authority by themselves. So we only hope that they will become responsible citizens, as my guru keeps on telling me. Article 51G, you are a responsible citizen. You need to protect your own land. No one else will come and try to save you, lest they will exploit you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much from Hyderabad Democracy Forum. Wonderful toast to you all. Good night to all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Namaste.